Well, after a very incident-packed test match in Ahmedabad between India and England, and literally the dust has settled after a couple of days, I'm joined by the Guardian's cricket writer Ali Martin to just try and pick over the bones of many things to talk about and think about following that result. So welcome to 98 Ali. What did you make of it all?
It was carnage, to be honest, wasn't it? It was, you talk about a test match that's over in just over 5 sessions. And actually, given that at the moment the UK press pack, we can't be out there, obviously, because of the pandemic and travel restrictions, etc. This was one chance to be able to get up at a half decent time to watch the cricket as opposed to 4 a.m.
Yeah.
So it's pretty gutting to see the match end so soon and so dramatically. Obviously, the result didn't go in England's favour, but it was absorbing cricket. I mean, it was gripping that second day when wickets felt more like they were going to come more often than boundaries. To be honest, that was the state of play, and that just when England looked like they might be able to muster something if they could get 1 or 2 partnerships together, you couldn't take your eyes off it. But that first over from Axar Patel in England's second innings that just blew away both Zach Crawley and Johnny Bairstow in the space of 3 balls with the DRS in between. As I say, it was just utterly compelling, gripping cricket. But then it all fizzled out, and here we are, on a Saturday afternoon when we really should be watching the 4th day. So pretty disappointing from that point of view. Obviously aside from the result as an Englishman, but it's just, it was just a bit dispiriting that it was over so soon, to be honest.
It could have been so much different, couldn't it? I mean, on paper, it was going to be a momentous occasion with that fantastic new stadium, which I don't think there were enough aerial shots of, were there, in the coverage?
I know. We've had a real treat this winter, haven't we? Because we've had pictures being back from Gaul in Sri Lanka and then from Chennai as well, and they were using the drone footage and giving us some great aerial shots and what have you. We obviously caught a bit of the stadium, and it was funny actually. It's the return of the crowds in India that has brought the return of fortune, for India themselves. And Virat Kohli, who's a captain, who just feeds off it. I mean, he's such an emotional guy and quite an intense guy, but he loves whipping a crowd up into a frenzy. It has given them a 12th man. Obviously, there's a huge number of contributing factors to the reason why, they're 2-1 up with 1 to play. But you've got to say that is definitely one of them, because that extra 12th man, that extra pressure on England, even a half full stadium, that the way that has brought the extra intensity to proceedings, and that combined with the spinning ball, England's players really haven't been able to cope.
Selection, there's been a lot made about this, and when the toss, I'm just wondering whether England was suckered a little bit by the earlier photos of the pitch being a green top, and then when it came down to it, it wasn't, and we went into the game with 1 spinner against India's selection of 3. But could we have done it any other way, given the fact that Moeen had gone back, and we know all about that? It's not really a debate anymore. Were our hands tied regarding selection?
Yeah, well, obviously we saw those pictures of the green pitch sort of 6 days out, but it's so far out from a match. That the grass is going to be taken off, and the England players would have been in training every day. They'd have seen that come off the pitch. They knew it was uncovered in the run up to the Test match as well, so it was drying out every day. But they had just convinced themselves that pink ball was going to do something for the seamers through the air, that they were going to get some lateral movement that you don't normally get in the subcontinent. I think a combination of that, plus possibly a bit of a lack of faith in Dom Bess, is what led them to sort of to go all out with their seam attack. To be honest, I don't think it's hindsight to say that it was a bad move, because even when team sheets came out of the toss, you just thought someone's got this badly wrong here, and it's probably not going to be the team with 3 to 4 seamers in it. So it left them with an uphill struggle. We also saw on that first morning. Well, I say morning, it was afternoon there, but Zach Crawley looked in really fine touch, didn't he? He's peeling off boundaries in that wonderful half century, but they were all coming off the seamers, and as soon as the spinners came on, it was such a different game. And then to see Joe Root there just chucking up. He's not he's a bit better than a part-time off spinner. I think I think he should have more faith in his own bowling than he does, to be honest. But he's not a frontline spinner, and to see him chucking it up there in the dirt and getting incredible figures, 5 for 8, his first 5 for in senior cricket. He had 3 for none at one point. To see that, yeah. You do see that the skill level has been sort of whipped out of the game to an extent from a batting perspective, and we were in lottery territory. And that moment when he's turning to himself in that situation and then taking the new ball in what was ultimately a very short run chase. But the fact that he finds himself doing that was pretty much holding his hands up to the fact that they got it badly wrong.
Yeah, there were some bright spots though. I thought Ben Foakes again had a very, very good game after the earlier success in the last Test match. Very, very quick with the stumpings and whipping the bails off, and amid all of the sort of batting calamities, he wasn't someone that necessarily came off as the worst of a bad bunch. How do you see his future going forward?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, his wicket keeping, as you say, is sublime. It almost doesn't need saying at the moment. But people talk about him being the best in the world, and I don't think it's hyperbole. I mean, we're getting very small sample sizes because we're really only seeing him on the subcontinent in international cricket. But it's in the subcontinent where you see that specialism come through, especially stood up at the stumps. Batting wise, it's interesting. He looked as comfortable as anyone out there, if anyone could be comfortable out in those conditions. And I do think that being a wicketkeeper, and probably coming from the second Test as well, no one has watched the ball come down more than the bloke behind the stumps. So he's got, his ability to pick up length and actually, and manoeuvre the ball around is pretty decent. And it gives him a good eye. He's set up with a solid defence. If I was going to have one criticism, and it's probably the thing that does mean that he's going to be behind Jos Buttler when he comes back, is probably that ability to take the attack to the opposition with the bat. And that, it shouldn't always be. That's not necessarily the wicketkeeper's job in all scenarios. But I did feel in that England first innings when they collapsed. They were 78 for 2. I'm trying to think. They lost when they were about 6 or 7. When they were about 7 or 8 down, and he's with that ridiculously long tail, which again was another knock-on effect from that poorly chosen attack. But when he's with the tail, I just thought there was a little bit of onus there on him to try and get on with it and try and get a few more runs. I know it involves being reckless, and it is a lottery on a surface like that, but really to get England up to sort of 160, 170, which might have been a bit more respectful, he probably could have been a bit more attacking a bit early, left it up to some of the other tail enders who weren't equipped to do it. And then when he eventually tried to force the issue 9 down, he got bowled. So it wasn't easy, but it's one of those small little areas where you look at it and you think, well, that's possibly where England, that's why they see someone like Buttler as their first choice wicketkeeper. It's really tough on the bloke. You'd like to think that they could play in the same team, to be honest, if Buttler could move to number 6 as a specialist batsman. The problem is England really want to blood Ollie Pope in the number 6 position because they see him as the absolute long-term future, for the middle order. So it's harsh on Ben Foakes, and I do sound like I've been overly critical there because I really like him as a player, but he's not above criticism, and he's got such a loyal fan base that even when you say something slightly against him, my word, you do get it back. But I don't know, maybe I'm really nitpicking here because he's a really incredible loveman. I mean, I don't, he's the best I've seen in my life. I mean, probably certainly going back to Jack Russell anyway. Yeah. And if Jack Russell says he's the best in the world up at the stumps, then that's good enough for me. Yeah,
Gilchrist put up a few tweets his way, applauding his performance as well, didn't he? So he has got a fan base.
There's Sarah Taylor as well, who I think is also, in terms of, you talk about wicketkeepers up at stumps, I think Sarah Taylor is one of the all-time greats as well. So to see cricketers like Gilchrist, like Taylor. I think there was Kieran Moore as well, the former India wicketkeeper as well, praising him as well. So that just goes to show. I know there's a bit of a wicketkeepers union going on, and everyone looks out for each other. But to see people like that admiring the craftsmanship on show, it's great to see. It's great for English cricket that they've got Ben Foakes, because that even if he isn't first choice in the sort of traditional English summer or in Australia, that were someone to go down injured, you've got a world class player coming in there behind the stumps.
That's right. What about the top order? Do we persevere, or do you think questions need to be asked about certainly the top three, or you think leave it and let them work it out?
It's tricky, isn't it? England they don't hide behind the fact that this is a project. This is a long-term project. They are building towards that Ashes series. Now, that will annoy some people. They're possibly not taking this series as seriously as they might be, or that they're not looking specialist enough for this particular set of conditions. I think as a long-term investment, bear in mind that, Sibley, Burns has had one series at Sri Lanka before this, but he missed a series that just gone. He's obviously out of the reckoning. He was out of the reckoning for the third test, and Crawley as well. This is their first experience of Indian conditions, isn't it? I think that combined with the quality they've got, they're up against. Certainly in Ashwin's just taken his 400th test wicket. He's the second fastest there after Mattaya Muratharan. So, and particularly in his own backyard, it is an incredibly difficult challenge that these guys have got. So I think I personally would go for perseverance here. Also bearing in mind that, as I say, when the summer comes around, back in home conditions, and then looking ahead to that Ashes series, which is ultimately, as I say, rightly or wrongly, that is the long-term goal for this set of players and for Joe Root's captaincy. That's what will define this year. That and the World T20 in India for the white ball side. Those two things will define how this year is judged. That being the case, at the moment, I'd stick with the personnel there. I certainly don't see it coming from the outside. Obviously, sure, I can't because of the bubbles and the inability to get someone out here to change things up. But I think in terms of a long-term investment, it's probably the way to go at the moment.
Do you think? It's interesting, isn't it? Because by the time the Ashes come round, we may be in a slightly different scenario. But do you think the bubble situation has had a bigger impact on players and performances than maybe we're giving credit for?
I think it's something that we have to factor in when we're sort of weighing up how much criticism and critique we have, that we do the performances. I think we do need to factor it in. It's asking a lot of them. You've only got to go back to the test just gone, the third test that is, that with Johnny Bairstow. Plays 2 games in Sri Lanka. He didn't get a half century. But he put on 2 century stands with Joe Root, I think, during that series. So he was looking in good form. He then flies home to rest, misses 2 test matches. For him to then come in at number 3 against someone like Axar Patel, who's actually putting it on a sixpence every time. It wasn't when the guy gets a pair. People are saying it's one of the worst test performances they've seen from a number 3. Well. Yes, possibly just looking in isolation at the individual shots and deliveries. But when you look at the overall context, as you say, with the bubble, with quarantine, when he came back to India, he'd have had 6 days in his hotel room before he could get out and train again. Yeah, I think we've got to give these guys a little bit more rope at the moment. And again, going back to the quality of the side they're up against in their own backyard. I know New Zealand are sort of number 1 in the world at the moment, but I feel like that's a bit of a technicality because I think India are the real deal.
Yeah. And, India's always been a tough tour for any England team going back as long as you can think. And, of course, the other tough overseas tour is Australia. So it's a real challenge of a year. What about, the Aussies will be licking their lips and obviously on the back of, I don't think they've got any test cricket between now and the Ashes.
Well, you say that, Darren, but if England win this last Test match, then Australia are through to the final of the World Test Championship. So the Aussies find themselves in a weird position of actually cheering on the Poms for once, which is quite nice. It's quite nice to have their backing finally.
But thinking about the Ashes, different conditions, different wickets, a different proposition. Broad and Anderson, both are saying that they are gunning for that tour. How much of a reality is it that they will be spearheading our attack? If they may be on the plane, but are they likely, those two, to be the front line?
I'd be surprised if they're front line, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw, fitness permitting, if we saw a continuation of this policy where they're sharing one spot. Whether they unite for a pink ball test like they just did, that didn't produce many wickets, the most recent one, but there might be a set of conditions where you might look to combine them again. But I do think it will probably get to the point where they are rotating for one spot. It's going to be with modern test series these days, the test matches come thick and fast, back-to-back games, asking guys who are north of 34 or 35 years old to keep backing up in that way is going to be difficult. So I think going back to England's last success in Australia, which was obviously the 10-11 series, that was built on a battery of fast bowlers, and actually Broad went home after the second test because he got injured. So it's going to be about depth in the seam department there. I think the emergence of Jofra Archer. I think Mark Wood's hardiness is pretty underrated these days. People label him as being injury prone, but actually, I can't think of the last time he missed a game through injury. He's missed out because of selection and because Archer's there as well in the mix. But I think his body's a lot more up to it these days. Again, possibly not back-to-back tests. But I think if England are smart about it, and I think in Chris Silverwood, they've got a head coach who's very much in tune with how his fast bowlers will work just because of his own, past role as fast bowling coach. And obviously back in the day when he was steaming in for Yorkshire and briefly for England, he'll have a greater appreciation of when to deploy his best resources at the best times. I know he didn't get it right in the pink ball test, clearly. But I'd like to think that when we're back in more seam-friendly Test cricket, that will come to the fore and that they'll be able to find the right blend to take 20 wickets and hopefully have a good varied attack. It's interesting. Stuart Broad's got a theory about this. The Ashes series in Australia just gone, the 17-18 series, we were obsessed with the lack of pace in England's attack. And I do think it did lack a bit of the cutting edge, certainly pace through the air and trying to get a bit more bounce out of those pitches. But I do think, as Stuart Broad has said, as much as we talk about pace in Australia, it's about runs on the board. And again, Silverwood is building a mentality and a mantra for this England side that obviously outside of the current series, because they're on a roll of 4 or 5 scores under 200, so we're not talking about big totals, but ultimately they have started grooving themselves, training the brain to build these bigger totals. They do that, they get runs on the board, they can build pressure. As we've seen with India's recent success in Australia, that's what you've got to do. If you can do that, get the runs on the board, build pressure, stay in the game. Australia are not, they're not that all-conquering at the moment. They're a side in flux. They're led by a captain who's possibly battling to be worthy of his place in the team. They've got some, obviously, star quality in there, but they've got holes as well. So, yeah, I think England shouldn't get too downbeat about events in India in terms of building up to the bigger project. That said, India come to England for 5 test matches in the summer. They've got a fantastic seam attack who will be, really excited to show off their skills because they've had to play second fiddle to Ashwin and Patel so far. They'll be keen for that series. That series will shape up to sort of define how England's Ashes squad looks at the end of it. And, India, with the bowlers they've got, they could take some people down with them.
Is that England squad pretty much where what it's going to be that get the plane to Australia? Or do you think there's chances maybe for 1 or 2 that have a decent domestic summer this year if someone shines, or do you think it's too much to bring someone green behind the gills into something like an Aussie tour?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's 9 rounds of championship cricket before the international summer starts, so there's enough time for people to lose form as there is to gain form as well. So even thinking back to the India tour 4 years ago, we left that tour thinking Haseeb Hameed was going to be the next. Yeah. He was locked in. He was locked in for 100 test matches. He couldn't buy a run in that early season. He didn't get picked as a result of it. Other people came in into his place, and he hasn't been back since. So I think the scope for change, the scope for people to come from the outside. It's interesting about the COVID bubbles in the last year that we've had of Test cricket. It's because England have had to have a much bigger squad. They've been taking sort of 20. They've had sort of 20, 25, 30 players at home, taking squads of about 20 on tour as well with them. They've already got a pretty big pool of players, and actually a pecking order has already sort of established itself. So it's going to be tough to break into, but I wouldn't rule it out either, just because we've still got a long way to go.
Yeah. And just finally, just any quick thoughts ahead of Thursday's Test match? I mean, what can we expect? Should England be bringing changes, or what do you think?
I think batting wise, they've sort of haven't really got a huge number of options at the moment. I mean, basically, there's Rory Burns sitting on the bench there, having just been dropped, and also Dan Lawrence has just been dropped as well. So to ask those guys to come back in, it would be a big ask. So I'll be surprised if they didn't stay with the lineup that they've got, certainly the batting lineup, 1 to 7. Thereafter, it's the case. I mean, I think John Best has to come in, essentially. I think that in itself is a big ask on the kid, because he's, he had his confidence. He was sky high after the first innings of the first Test match. He'd taken 4 wickets. He took out numbers 3 to 6 in the Indian lineup. Any spinner would be proud of that haul, including Virat Kohli. So he was buoyant. But by the end of that Test match, he was throwing down all sorts of long hops and full tossers, and ultimately got whipped out the firing line for Moeen. So to ask him to then come back into the fray after that, is after such a chastening sort of experience, and knowing that also that they asked Moeen to stay on, that's not going to be filling with massive amounts of confidence. However, I think conditions are going to dictate that he's probably going to have to play. They'll separate out Broad and Anderson again. I would expect Jimmy Anderson to keep his spot because he didn't bowl that many overs. Stuart Broad's just gone back-to-back tests, even though he didn't bowl a huge amount. But I'd have thought he'd be the one to make way. And then it's a question of whether Jofra Archer can get through another Test match, or do they have a look at Mark Wood, or do they have a look at Ollie Stone? I thought Ollie Stone was particularly impressive in the one Test match he played. So they're the kind of changes I think they're going to make. Whether it changes the outcome, I don't know. India now, with that World Test Championship there, all they have to do is avoid defeat. Now, there's 2 results that get them to the final of the World Test Championship. It's a victory and a draw. I don't know why they'd want to take the draw out of the equation by producing another ranked Turner that guarantees a result, because they could fall the wrong side of it. Just as in that last match, they could have, England won that toss. If they'd stuck 200 on the board, England would have won that Test match, I think. So to produce another ranked Turner would be a bit of a gamble from India. Having said that, they're so confident in their own abilities right now, and they probably think that they've got England's batsmen between the ears, that they could easily go that route again, and it's going to be a massive challenge for England. Walking away with a 3-1 defeat for England, I don't think would be that galling. I think to win a Test match in India just in isolation is an incredible achievement when you're coming up against a side of that quality. 2-2 would be fantasy stuff, really. If you think back to the team that won in 2012, they had Swan and Panesar, 2 absolute world-class spinners. For England to get 1 win would be great with the spin attack they've got. To come out with a 2-2 series draw would be something else with the bowling options they've got. So I don't expect a different outcome, hand on heart. But as I say, if India do produce a ranked Bunsen, you never know. We could have another lottery game, spin the roulette wheel, and you never know.
And just a quick word on Test cricket being live on terrestrial TV again. It's been great, but a bit disappointing that the game itself didn't prolong a bit longer.
Yeah, I know. That's something I was talking about it earlier, wasn't I? From a selfish point of view, of having to get up in the morning, but the idea of having that pink ball test, especially going into the weekend, could have got a really bumper audience. The numbers have been decent. They've been about 1.7 million peak.
That's
I've
right,
seen
yeah.
it. Yeah, and an average sort of in the high 800,000, 900,000. It can only be a good thing. I mean, I know that terrestrial TVs, the debate sort of divides. I go straight down the middle, to be honest. It's a bit boring, but I personally think that Sky Cricket, the quality of coverage you get and what you get for your money is fantastic. I don't think a cricket fan, if that's what you love, you couldn't ask for much more, to be honest. Great analysis, great coverage, great production values. But there is a balance to be struck, and I do like the idea. I personally think that at least 1 Test match a summer at home should be shared with a terrestrial broadcast. So just open up the shop window, get more people seeing it, and actually it's an advert for Sky itself. So, the Channel 4 coverage has been interesting. It's been very pared back. It's not quite what we're used to. We're getting the world feed from the BCCI, which is sometimes a little bit frustrating. It sounds like you're listening to a bit of propaganda at times, and not every umpiring decision gets the same scrutiny depending on which side it's gone against. But all those things considered, ultimately Test cricket, I think we're in a golden period for Test cricket at the moment. I know we've not had a tight one in this series so far, but Test cricket in the last 2-3 years has been incredible. And I just think opening it up and getting as many people seeing that for what it is, get that buzz going, it just helps perpetuate it. It can't all be about white ball cricket, because we all like a white ball cricket. We love a T20 night down. I'm sure you love going down to Chelmsford to watch a nice floodlit game and cheer on the boys. But ultimately Test cricket is the real deal. That's what it's all about. And when you bring people in, when you teach them about the nuances, about the strategies, about the ebbs and flows, the narratives, the stories, it resonates so much longer. The defeats are they resonate for so much longer. They hurt more. The victories are even sweeter because they're achieved over 5 days. Long live Test cricket. I'm such a massive Test cricket advocate that I just want as many people to see it as possible. And so Sky, brilliant. Just open it up a little bit more to the sort of wider audience, to the uninitiated. And really, there's I don't know why people keep saying the format's dying. It's not dying. It's just
no.
It's like it's got a death wish when people say that. I don't, particularly when administrators say it, and nothing gets my back up more, to be honest. I think, you should be selling the product. This is the absolute ultimate blue ribbon product on your shelf, and you're saying that it's got a sell-by date. Behave.
Well, I mean, all you've got to do is look at the last. I mean, forget England. I mean, look at the the Australia-India series. Look at Bangladesh, West Indies. I mean, my word.
Exactly. And we're getting some famous away wins at the moment. The quality, and I actually, one of the best things about it is the players still treat it as the absolute ultimate, and you can see it. No one's phoning it in when they're playing Test cricket. Everyone is playing for their absolute lives out there. And that is what makes it just a cut above. I hate being elitist like that, but it just is. It's just a fact. It's just a fact, Darren. I can't.
Yeah. All right, let's wrap it up there, Ali. Really lovely to talk to you, and I'm sure you'll be back as part of our new 98 Not Out press gang, and we shall be talking to you again. But many thanks for all your thoughts today on the test series and the cricket that's yet to come in 2021. So many thanks. That's Ali Martin from The Guardian.